A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to the ICANN initiative, the Hindu and Indian Express analysis. So we will start the day with the quote of the day. This is one of my favorite quotes. It says, "Our behavior depends upon our decisions and not on our conditions." So it shows that no matter what our condition is, we are not bound by that condition. Rather, on what we consciously decide, our behavior depends on that. Even yesterday, we saw the personality of the day is Roshni Badoria. Her conditions were such that she could have easily given up on studies. She had to cycle for 24 kilometers. Her father was a poor farmer. So the conditions were all favorable for her to give up. But she didn't. That was her conscious decision, and her behavior depended on that. And this applies even for us aspirant community also, particularly in times of COVID and this uncertainty. It's a condition, all these forms a part of the condition, but it is our decision that will determine our behavior. We either decide to succumb to this uncertainty and go lazy on our studies, or we still make up our mind, be determined and continue our studies to top this exam. So whatever in life, whatever happens to us, it is never because of our conditions. Even tomorrow as a civil servant, when you do some good work, maybe which is not liked by your bosses, then you might be transferred to, you might get some punishment posting, or you might be forced in the department, you might be pressurized in your work to be corrupt, to be involved in corruption, or to do some favor for somebody. These are all a part of your condition, but then your behavior will depend upon your decision. We always weigh the consequences and we make a conscious decision. So this shows that if we are not limited by our conditions, we are not bound by our conditions, and we always make a conscious decision, and that's upon that depends our behavior. Now we'll start with the first topic of the day, which is about the Gangster of Kanpur. So this is a classic example of criminalization of politics. So as we already know this, what happened in Kanpur. So 8 policemen in Uttar Pradesh, Kanpur, they were killed by a criminal gang of Vikas Dubey. So Vikas Dubey is a gangster in the Kanpur region, and he has over 60 cases of murder, extortion and kidnapping and other violent crimes pending against him. But what this whole episode has brought to light is the unholy nexus that exists between the politician, criminal and the police. So initially the presence of this unholy nexus was clearly brought forward by the Anand Vora report in 1990s. So Vora report spoke about the unholy nexus that exists between the politician, the criminal, the police. So this is a classic example of that, because Vikas Dubey got the information that the police were raiding on his home from sources that were within the police. And also the gangster has a political backing or political support in the region also. So this is an example of criminalization of politics, and how those people who have criminal antecedents are getting political backing, and they end up becoming politicians themselves. So the casualty of this unholy nexus is the rule of law. So rule of law is going to collapse because of such things. And criminalization of politics and politicization of criminals is a very it's a very common topic which can be asked under electoral reforms also. Because as electoral reforms is a broader concept, under that is a criminalization of politics. So which has become, which is only increasing now compared to the past 3 Lok Sabhas. Those politicians who are having criminal background, who have criminal cases pending against them, is only increasing. So this can be a good question under electoral reforms, so you need to be prepared for it. So you can quote this example and speak about the unholy nexus that exists between the criminal, politician and the police, and that is leading to the collapse of rule of law. Now we'll go to the next topic, which is the poverty related issues. So this whole editorial was on now because of the COVID and the lockdown, what issues that has brought forward and how it can be, what should be done related to it in the future. But this whole article can also be seen from the point of view of poverty and the issues that it brings forth, and what can be done to deal with it. So when we talk about poverty related issues, the first is about the poverty estimation itself. So it is always said that poverty estimation in India is very conservative. That means we have very low thresholds for poverty. So because of this, just a small percentage of the population is estimated to be poor. So therefore, our poverty estimation itself is very conservative. The second issue is that we have not been updating on the poverty estimation for quite some time. So it is not regularly estimated and it is not regularly updated. So this is the second issue. The third issue is regarding the availability of data. So we are not updating the official poverty lines. We are not collecting the latest data regarding the number of poor. So the data on consumption expenditure from the national sample surveys in the recent years have also not shown properly the number of poor. So therefore, there is always that ambiguity when it comes to estimating the number of poor in India. So whenever we talk about poverty and how to alleviate poverty, the first and the most basic thing that we need is to be able to properly estimate the number of poor in India. So that itself is not happening properly and regularly. So in this regard, according to this household consumption expenditure that is reported by the periodic labor force survey. So this happened in 2017-18. The periodic labor force survey's household consumption expenditure shows that nearly 42%, or that is 56 crore people in India, are officially poor, according to this periodic labor force survey, which measures the household consumption expenditure. And what this article argues is that this was a number of poor before the COVID struck and before the lockdown. And now this is only going to increase in the future. So people, many of the people are just above the poverty line, and when the COVID has hit, these people have also fallen below the poverty line. And a concept called as poverty deepening. Poverty deepening means it is the worsening of the poverty, and it is also a further fall in the quality of life. So both of this has happened because of the COVID crisis and the consequent lockdown. People have lost jobs and their poverty has further worsened. So this phenomenon is called as poverty deepening. So this is happening, and in this context, it becomes all the more important for us to be able to estimate poverty in a much more objective manner. So this is one issue, as the improper poverty itself. Next we come to is the rural poverty. So under rural poverty, the rural poverty is already high, but on top of that, because of the COVID crisis, the migrant workers have started to migrate from the urban areas back to rural areas. So this has given rise to this phenomenon of reverse migration. So now a lot of these poor people from the urban areas are going to migrate back to rural areas, thereby further increasing rural poverty. So we therefore need to tackle this. And the very good way, or the best way to tackle this, is to help generate employment back in the rural area itself, so as to provide jobs to these migrant workers who have lost jobs in the cities and have migrated to cities. So this becomes very important, that the demand for work in the rural areas is going to increase. So we have to meet this increase in the demand for work in the rural areas. So therefore we need a kind of revamped MG scheme, so that the increase in the demand for the work can be easily met. So this revamped scheme would require that nearly 90 million workers should be guaranteed work. So this requires at least, this means that at least 20 days of work per month needs to be given to these people. And all of this means that an additional fiscal stimulus of nearly 1.6 lakh crore will be needed. So rural poverty is another emerging issue which is going to be more severe because of this phenomenon of reverse migration now. So this can be meted out by generating employment back in the rural areas. And the way we are going to do this is to revamp MG and increase the fiscal allocation for it, so that more jobs can be generated for an additional 90 million workers now. The next issue that always comes with poverty is food security. So even in the GS syllabus, there is a topic called as issues related to poverty and hunger. So poverty and hunger always go together. So that is why providing food security to the poor becomes very important. So in this regard, again, so many measures are being suggested. One is either universalize the PDS system, or that's one nation, one ration card system. So basically, the food security for the poor, both in the urban and the rural areas, needs to be improved. So this is another issue that is related to poverty. You can have a general question like, what are the issues, what is poverty, what are the issues related to poverty, how to overcome, or it can be a general question. So in that, always remember to include one dimension of hunger and food security. They always go together, and you can suggest your own reforms. This editorial didn't have much suggestions to offer on the public distribution system or food security aspect, but this is always a good dimension, and this should be included in the answers. So the issue that is related to poverty is the urban poverty. So now that there has been lockdown in the mainly in the urban areas, the economy in the urban areas has coming to a grinding halt. And also because of reverse migration, now it is very difficult to find workers in the urban areas. So therefore, however, there will be definitely few people who stay back in the urban areas, and their poverty is only going to worsen. In order to curb this, we need to generate jobs for the urban poor as well. So till now, the rural poverty has received more attention, but now urban poverty is also something which requires more attention to be paid. So therefore, we need to focus specifically on the urban poor and help generate jobs for them so that they can have a decent living and life standard in the urban areas. So what we can do is we can create jobs for them and engage them in the development of the urban infrastructure. This can include some slum development or drinking water supply, toilet construction, even the parks and the common areas, urban afforestation. In all these areas, these urban poor can be included, and we can generate jobs for them. So by this way, the urban poor also get the job, and at the same time, the urban infrastructure is also that also becomes more robust. So this is one way to deal with the urban poor. The next issue related to poverty is it is like a measure that we need to take to curb poverty. That is the small and medium industries promotion. So these industries, they are a large in number, which employ the semi-skilled, the low-skilled, and even the skilled people. As they are able to absorb a large number of people and generate jobs for them, it is very important that the MSMEs are promoted and encouraged by the government. So they are very good avenues for job generation, and they need to be encouraged. So when you're writing about poverty issues as a measure to overcome, job generation is the first most important thing that you will be writing. Under this, apart from writing the rural poverty and urban poverty, MSMEs promotion is very important. They need to be encouraged because they can absorb a large amount of labor force. In fact, economic survey talks about the missing middle. So where the manufacturing industries have been missed, and India has transited directly from an agricultural economy to a service-oriented economy. So this has led to jobless growth because the manufacturing sector is one sector which can absorb a large amount of labor force. So through SME promotion, a large amount of labor force can be absorbed, and India's manufacturing foundations can become more strong. So this will also improve our Make in India performance. It will improve our domestic manufacturing. It will reduce our imports and improve our exports. At the same time, it is going to generate jobs for a lot of people and help people provide a cushion against poverty. So therefore, promotion of SMEs is again very important. So these were the various issues that were related to poverty and how to tackle them. Now we'll go to the next topic, which is global warming. So this whole editorial analyzes how global warming can have an impact on various dimensions in the economy. So we will go through this analysis. Now, at the outset, this article mentions that the global warming has a direct correlation with the pollution levels. So the more the pollution levels in the cities, more will be the concentration of gases like carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, etc. And therefore, more will be the levels of global warming. So then it goes on to discusses the impact of global warming on various dimensions. And the first, it says, what is the impact of global warming on the health? So globally, nearly 9 million premature deaths are happening because of air pollution. So this air pollution again directly contributes to global warming. So 9 million premature deaths are happening every year because of air pollution and fine particulate matters, particularly the 2.5 pm. And also India has 14 out of the top 20 most polluted cities in the world. So that is also a distinction that India has, that 14 out of 20 most polluted cities in the world are in India. So particularly in Delhi, for instance, last year a public health emergency was declared after the Diwali celebrations, when Delhi's air quality approached 500, which is under the category of severe plus emergency. So this is the impact that global warming can have on health. The second is that global warming also relates to various illnesses among the people. The first is because of this air pollution and all, it can lead to several respiratory disorders. So cardiovascular diseases, respiratory disorders, it can give rise to because of the PM particulate matter particles, particularly the PM 2.5 ones. The second one is that as the global warming and there is an increase in the temperature and the moisture levels in the air, it also leads to more breeding of mosquitoes and thereby more mosquito-borne diseases. So diseases like dengue and all are going to increase in the future because of higher breeding of these mosquitoes and the parasites. So mosquito-borne diseases are also connected directly to global warming. So that again is going to increase. Next is the impact of global warming on agriculture or food security. The editorial says that the locust swarms that we are seeing now in Jaipur, Gurugram, they are also linked to the climate change. So the locust swarms, which was not as severe as any year before. So it shows that there is definitely a link between these locusts and also the climate change. And regarding locust swarm and the kind of impact it can have on agriculture, the way a swarm can eat up the entire agricultural field. So they can eat up the entire leaves, how that we have already discussed, how the locust swarms can affect the agriculture and the food security. That has already been discussed. So this way, climate change and global warming can affect agriculture as well. So next, we need to see the way forward. First is analyzing the benefits. That is, many times it is not among the spending priorities, but we need to analyze that if we are spending to reduce the climate change and the global warming, then that is going to lead to benefits in the health and also benefits in the productivity. So if because of investing in such green technologies, if the health impact, the adverse health impact is going to reduce, then it is going to reduce our spending on the health. The dependent population is going to reduce. In fact, spending on reducing the air pollution and the greenhouse gases can provide health benefits which ranges between 1.4 to 2.5 times the amount that is spent for the actions that are being taken. So therefore health benefits are going to be there. Next is productivity also. So when the air is clean and fresh, the productivity of the labor force of the people is also going to be high. So therefore we must first consider that our investments to mitigate the climate change and our investments to reduce air pollution is all going to lead us to benefits in health as well as in productivity terms. So it is not a wastage of money, it is not an expenditure, but rather it is an investment. This should be the first realization. The second is, of course, we have to work on our transportation, where we popularize the mass transport and provide last mile connectivity so that the people use mass transport more and not the individual cars and vehicles. And the next step is the choice of fuel. So the fossil fuels are going to produce more air pollution. So therefore we can shift for more climate friendly fuels like the compressed natural gas and even the electric vehicles, the hybrid vehicles and the electric vehicles. So this is another shift that can be done. And then at the end of it, we must have a very strong and a robust public health care system. So these were some of the way forward that were suggested in this editorial. Now we'll go to the next, which is drug trafficking. On drug trafficking, we have already seen twice before about the drug trafficking, which are the two hotspots, the Golden Triangle and the Golden Crescent. So we have already seen these two hotspots, and how because of the COVID and the lockdown, there are few changes in the way drug trafficking used to happen. So now there is more maritime route that is being used. So all that we have already seen. So in this particular article, it is just talking about the status of India. So the fourth highest seizure of opium in 2008 was reported from India. So first is Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. So India had seen the fourth highest seizure of opium. This is according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes Global World Drugs Report. So under this report, it was India's status that it has seen the fourth largest seizures of opium. So this particular information or data you can use when you're talking about the issue of drugs and in India. Now we'll go to the next topic, which is related to Indo Pacific. So on Indo Pacific also, we have discussed before the relevance of Indo Pacific and how the countries in the Indo Pacific are collaborating with each other. So what we'll be looking at in this article is further India's vision on Asia Pacific and Indo Pacific, and what has been China's response to India's support for Indo Pacific. So at the outset, the Prime Minister of India gave a keynote address at Shangri-La Dialogue that happened in Singapore in 2018. So in this dialogue, he clearly enunciated what is India's vision of the Indo-Pacific. He told that what we need is inclusive, open and free Indo-Pacific. So inclusive and open Indo-Pacific is what is the aim of the idea of the Indo-Pacific itself. So as when India has started to be more open to this idea of the Pacific, China has also been responding to that. Let's look at the China's response to this idea of cooperation among the Indo-Pacific countries. The first is the sea lanes of communication. Now in the Indo-Pacific, China also has its sea lanes of communication through which its trade and commerce is happening. So therefore, for China, the securing of these sea lanes of communication is very important for its economy to safeguard its own trade and commerce. So China has always been against this Indo-Pacific idea per se, that it might lead to the sea lanes of communication being dominated, monopolized, and China may not be given access to these, so which might threaten its trade and commerce. So this has been the first response of China, that it will threaten its sea lanes of communication and thereby its trade and commerce. So therefore, China went on to criticize this whole initiative by calling it a sea foam. So what China says is this idea of the Indo-Pacific, it's like a sea foam in the Pacific or in the Indian Ocean, and which is soon going to dissipate. So this was China's reaction to the idea of Indo-Pacific. The next thing China talks about is a containment. So China feels that this whole idea of the Indo-Pacific and the country supporting that idea is actually a counter-China policy that is led by the United States. So this is basically to contain the rise of China. So China is rising, it is becoming the leader in the Asian, among the Asian countries. So therefore, in order to contain China, in order to contain the rise of China, it is a US-led strategy. So the containment strategy, this is what China says, that this is a cause of Indo-Pacific. Next, China talks about is a Malacca dilemma. So the Malacca Strait is very important for, it's a choke point, and it's very important for the trade and commerce for various countries across the world. Even for China, the Malacca Strait is very important as a lot of trade of China passes through this strait. But what it says is that again, the countries in the Indo-Pacific may dominate the Malacca Strait and therefore thereby hinder the trade and commerce of China, and Chinese vessels may be hindered the movement because of the other countries in the Indo-Pacific dominating this region. So again, this is because they all want to contain China. So China comes forward with this idea of Malacca dilemma, where it says that Malacca Strait can be dominated by countries in the Indo-Pacific. Therefore, if China needs to safeguard its trade and commerce, then it will have to find out various other routes through which it can safeguard its trade and commerce. So it started in searching for alternatives. In this search for alternatives, it started promoting the maritime Silk Route. So, in the maritime Silk Route, China started developing ports and other infrastructure in various countries, so that China can have alternative routes and alternative options in case Malacca is dominated by few other countries. So, therefore, it started the maritime Silk Route. Next is the US hegemony. So, China says that US wants to be a hegemonic power, and also India wants to have its regional influence in the Indian Ocean. It is because of these two countries their own will to be the dominant player in the region, and they wanted to challenge the Chinese plan that this Indo Pacific idea has been started. So US wants to be a hegemonic power not just in its region but also in the Indo Pacific. So this US hegemony, which the United States wants to maintain at any cost, and India's desire to be a dominant player on influence or in the whole Indian Ocean region. So that is why India is also cooperating with United States on this idea of Indo-Pacific. So next is non-military activities, means in order to overcome the Malacca dilemma and the US hegemony in the region, and the fact that China feels that this is a part of containment strategy by United States and other countries to contain the rise of China. In order to tackle all this, China started some non-military activities. As in, it wanted to take up some activities in various countries which might seem to be non-military to see, but however it serves as strategic purposes for China. So it was under this that China started developing and building ports. So give the example of Djibouti or Gwadar, Hambantota, Sitwe port, and Seychelles. So in all these places, China started to build ports which were basically for the economic purposes per se, but however they also had strategic importance for China. So China just wanted to reduce the military color of its initiatives, but nevertheless these ports also served a strategic purpose of China, and China wanted to increase its maritime presence in the Indian Ocean. China also started doing various maritime surveys, ocean mapping, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief HADR activities, and all this and tried to give it a non-military color, but they did have several strategic goals. So this was all this summarizes the Chinese response. And also at this point of time, I want to tell you that this is how you must be making notes also. Now this whole article, whatever I explained what Malacca dilemma is, so if you're talking about Malacca dilemma, maybe you will draw a map and show where the Malacca Strait is, and then say that it is an important choke point. Similarly, the Gulf of Aden and all that. Maritime Silk Route and these ports, again, you're going to show on map and try to explain how China is trying to increase its presence and influence in the Indian Ocean region. So these are the things that you're actually going to do in the exam, to draw the map and all that. And you are going to explain what was the purpose of maritime Silk Route, US hegemony, the containment strategy, everything. But what I have done is the whole editorial of the Indian Express, I have just summarized in few keywords. And I will write down in my notes only these few keywords. So this is how you are supposed to take notes of whatever you're reading. That just write down the keywords, and when you see the keyword, you must have so much clarity on the subject that when you see the keyword, you will know what exactly you have to write, what exactly you have to explain, what maps you have to draw, everything you will know. So now whenever Indo-Pacific issue comes, that I need to write these few keywords, this is what I will know. And keywords is all that matters in the question. So I write these keywords, underline, and explain the rest of the explanation that you have clarity on that. So don't make your notes very bulky that it becomes very difficult to revise. Have conceptual clarity and try to make your notes very concise and precise. Write the important keywords which you must never miss in the exam in the answer. And then along with it, explanation should be crystal clear in your mind. So this is how your notes should be. Now, as a part of the way forward, what should be the way forward? The first is that we must be clear on the idea of Indo-Pacific. As Prime Minister had mentioned in the keynote address in the Shangri-La dialogue, the idea of Indo-Pacific is to have an inclusive, participative and evolving Indo-Pacific region. So where there are some common interests between the countries, and it is based on the principles of openness, participation and inclusiveness. So this is the idea of Indo-Pacific. And the idea of Indo Pacific was not to per se counter China, rather, it should be a forum where the countries in the Indo Pacific who have common interests are coming together to advance these common interests, and the intention is not to make it a source of conflict or a source of tension. So this is how this idea of Indo-Pacific should be clearly put forward to the world. So this is as part of the way forward. Now we'll see the last topic of the day, which is related to the criminal justice system. So in this, the news is related to the formation of a 5-member expert committee by the Ministry of Home, which is going to review and overhaul the criminal laws of the country. So the criminal laws will include the Indian Penal Code, the Indian Evidence Act, the Code of Criminal Procedure. So all of this are going to be reviewed by this 5-member committee, and it is going to modify it, overhaul this entire criminal laws of the country. So this backdrop, we will see why do we need an overhaul of the criminal laws in the country. The first reason is that it has colonial roots. So what if it has colonial roots? Because the British Raj was a police state. It was there to occupy India, to extract as much of wealth from India as possible. So they never made India their home, and their governance was never for the welfare of the people. But today, India, an independent India, is a welfare state. So where it is, the welfare of the people is the duty of the government, and that is what the government is supposed to do. So therefore, there is a change in the basic aim of the government itself. So before, it was just extraction of wealth and subjugation of people, but now it is the development establishment of a welfare state. Therefore, accordingly, the criminal laws are also going to be very different, where in the police state and the colonial rule, it is going to be based on punishment and all that and retribution. When the welfare state, it has to be based more on reformation and aiding the people and establishing a crime-free society. So because there is a basic change in the aim of the state and the government itself, these laws need an overhaul, as these were rooted in the colonial rule. So this is the first reason. The second is the constitutional spirit. So independent India has a constitution of its own, which is a fundamental law of the land. So no matter what, the spirit of the constitution should always be preserved. And the spirit of the constitution, the centrality is that it is based on the primacy of liberty, equality, dignity, everything. So this constitutional spirit somewhere gets violated if you look into these criminal laws like IPC. There are several sections where you feel that the liberty of the person, the equality of the person is not being guaranteed. People are discriminated, for instance, based on their sexual orientation. So which is again against the spirit of equality, which is espoused in the constitution. So many of these laws are against the constitutional spirit, and that is the second reason why we need to overhaul them. The third reason is the Victorian morality. So what happens is that when during the British society, it had its own Victorian morality. It felt that sexual acts between two men or women is against the law of the nature, and therefore there was section 377 which criminalized homosexuality. So this is an era of Victorian morality, but now societies have changed. Societies have become more modern, more open, and we now recognize the basic right of every human being. So where every human being needs to be respected and treated with dignity, irrespective of the sexual orientation. So therefore, the standards of morality have also now completely changed. In fact, to not recognize their rights is immoral today. So therefore, we need to give more preference to the individual agency today, where the individual per se is respected and is treated with dignity, and we therefore need to do away with this outdated ideas of morality. So the classic example of this is section 377, that is decriminalizing homosexuality. Homosexuality is one thing, adultery is another thing. So these are the various points which according to the Victorian principles, they were moral, but according to today's Indian society, they are not. So therefore, these needs to be changed now, and this is the third reason why we need to overhaul the criminal laws. Next is a misuse of sections. So several of these sections, we have seen a lot of misuse that is happening. A classic example of this is section 124A, which is sedition. So sedition laws are being misused to curb speech, to suppress dissent. It has a chilling effect on the freedom of free speech, freedom of speech and expression. So under the garb of under this section, several journalists have been arrested, several opposition party politicians have been arrested. So misuse is happening of this particular section, and therefore we see that some of these sections are being misused by the state against its own citizens, and they were very harsh, which only suited the colonial interests but not the interests of a welfare independent sovereign state. So these sections will also need to be diluted or modified, and this is another reason why we need to overhaul laws. Next is the new crimes. So in a society that has been emerging, new crimes have also now made their presence in the society related to technology, like cyber crimes, sexual offenses. So these have all several things have surfaced now in the society. Several new crimes have emerged. So therefore we need, which were not there in the colonial era. So now we need to consider these new offenses, and we need to codify our laws related to these new offenses. So this is another reason why the criminal laws needs to be overhauled. Next is the renewed debates. So these laws, some of these laws, criminal laws, have been very, very stringent, and which goes against a civilized society as we think so today. So there have been renewed debates on the relevance of death penalty. So death penalty nowadays is considered among a large number of nations that it is not a part of a civilized nation, it's not a part of a civilized society. It shows very uncivilized and barbaric practices. So therefore death penalty should not be there. So this has been the stand taken by several countries across the world, and even the Supreme Court's various decisions in the past have shown how it is going step by step away from, little by little away from death penalty. So there have been these renewed debates on various issues, which includes death penalty, and all of these needs to be considered while we are criminalizing our laws. So what kind of and what level of punishment needs to be given, and what are the standards of a civilized society? There is a renewed debate on all of these. So all of these needs to be considered while we are forming our criminal laws. So this is another reason overhauling the criminal laws. Next is the statute books versus the rulings. This means that in the procedural aspects of criminal law, there are so many procedural aspects which are not in harmony with the court's own rulings. So the court rulings, there are several landmark rulings which strikes down some provisions and inserts some safeguards against the misuse of some law. But however, the processes in these criminal laws are used by the state against the citizens, and they are being misused. So these processes are going against the court rulings only. So that is why there is a need to harmonize these processes in the criminal laws as well as the court rulings, which have kind of kept pace with the changing nature of the society. These two needs to be therefore harmonized. In order to harmonize these two, again, we need to have a relook at our criminal laws. The last one is the stakeholders. So when we talk of a criminal justice system, there are various stakeholders. When we talk of a crime, there is a victim, there is an accused, and the state is also involved, because if it is a crime, then it is a crime against it's the society. So therefore the state is involved, the accused is involved, the victim is involved. There are various stakeholders who are involved. But if you look at the current criminal justice system, the victim is somewhere marginalized. Then there are a lot of institutional delays which are involved. So the victim never ends up getting any justice. The accused was also many times harassed. There is unnecessary institutional delays. So we also need to consider from the point of view of various stakeholders of the the criminal justice system. So from the point of the stakeholders of all the stakeholders, we need to again relook at the criminal laws. This was not done, this precise measure was not taken by the colonial rule. But now as a civilized nation, we can have a relook at the criminal laws from the point of view of various stakeholders. So this is the last reason why we need to, so we have listed 8 reasons why we need to have a relook at our criminal laws. So these were other articles which weren't important. India's foreign relations, again, there was no substance in this. Then right to ask questions is regarding the Galvin clash and how the government needs to be open about what's happening at the border. Again, nothing related to nothing much relevant for him from exam point of view. Once upon an Asian century, this whole article, it was written by Sri Raja Mohan, but this didn't have much relevance for the exam. It just says that what we aspired was an Asian century where countries like China and India should be the prominent players. But now what is actually happening is we're kind of having a Chinese century rather than an Asian century. So, but nothing much in this again. Satan Kulams is again the custodial death episode on which we have already discussed enough, and there was nothing new in this. So these were the other editorials which were not. Now we will be discussing yesterday's question. So I just give a very broad question so that you can prepare nicely on the whole topic. So I won't be discussing the entire topic from all the dimensions, but I'll discuss the basics. So when we talk of the electoral reforms which needs to be done in India, then you have to write at least some 6 to 8 points. So for that you can adopt a number of categorization, or whatever way of categorization you can do. So one way is to classify it as the 3 M's. So the 3 M's involved in are, one is the money power, the muscle power, and the media power, and we need to tackle all these 3. So when we talk of the money power, so you can say that there needs to be a ceiling on the political party expenditure. Now we have a ceiling on the candidate expenditure, but that is not enough. We need to have a ceiling on the political party expenditure. So that is one measure. Second is that we need to bring the political parties under RTI so that we know exactly what their money dealings have been, from where they are receiving their donations and all that. Then all the donations can be made to be received by the political parties through the digital route without any threshold of the quantity or the amount of money. Everything should come, all the donations should come to the digital route. This can be another thing. Then former Chief Election Commissioner S.Y. Qureshi talks about electoral trust, so to which everybody will make the contribution, and then depending upon the winning percentage of the political party, then money will be given to them. So this concept of electoral trust can be brought about. Then Election Commission has proposed that Election Commission needs to be legally empowered so that it can cancel those elections where it has a credible evidence that the money power is being used and abused. So that power can be given to the Election Commission to cancel the elections where it has evidence that money power is being used. So this will, so like that you can write few measures related to money power. Then you can come to muscle power. Again, you can say that in the ADR case, Supreme Court had told that the criminal antecedents, the assets and liabilities need to be transparently disclosed. But it doesn't happen. So in many cases, that is, the public doesn't get to know that in many cases. So this should happen. And then in the Lily Thomas case also, the court held that there must be immediate disqualification if any criminal case the parliamentarian is accused. So now it doesn't happen, because if after the decision of a court and if the politician is convicted, but within 3 months the politician makes an appeal to the High Court, then until the court decides, then there is no disqualification. But under Lily Thomas court said that there has to be immediate disqualification. So this needs to be followed. Okay, so like that you can mention some measures for the muscle power. Then you can tell about media power. In the media power at present, paid news is not an offense. So this paid news need to be made an offense. First of all, we need to define what paid news is, and it has to be made an offense under the Representation of People Act. So for that we need to amend the ROP, and we need to make paid news as an offense by defining what constitutes paid news. So then apart from this kind of classification, you can also have an institutional reforms. So in the institutional reforms, you can talk mainly about empowering the Election Commission of India. So now the election commissioners, they don't even have security of tenure similar to the chief election commissioner. So security of tenure is very much important to ensure their independence. So we can say that the election commissioners should be given a security of tenure. Then the election commission should also have contempt power similar to the courts in India, because many times the election commission gives many guidelines which are not followed at all. So frequent contempts will affect the dignity of this institution also. So therefore we can think of giving contempt powers to the election commission. It must have the power to audit the accounts of the political parties. So all of these things then ECI has come out with the model code of conduct, which can be given legal backing. So these you can talk about the institutional reforms. Then another important issue is the caste based politics, so where the campaigning all happens on the communal and caste lines, so which will divide the society in India, and it will destroy its social fabric. So this needs to be tackled. So those election campaigns which are happening along communal or caste lines should be banned under are already banned under the election rules, but as far as implementation is concerned, it is not happening. So therefore this needs to be done. And you can talk at two further levels, that is the party level and the voter level. So at the party level, you can talk about the party should be having internal democracy. It should field more women candidates. It should come under RTI. Its accounts should be audited. All these measures you can talk under party level. Then from the voter level, you can say that, see, the voter, many of the voters, they accept the freebies, vote bank, like freebies are given to the voters, refrigerator, washing machine, mixers, grinders, what all is given. So they need to be made more aware that their vote is not for sale here, and it is their right in a democratic country that they've been given, which is sacrosanct, and that shouldn't be offered for sale like that. So improving the voter education, making them well informed and aware. So from that voter perspective, voter level, you can talk. So like that, you can adopt various classifications and you can talk. And in between, it is also very important to give good amount of data. For instance, if you're talking about money, then you can say that 82% of all the Lok Sabha members are crorpatis. So this data you can give. And similarly, when you're talking about the muscle power, you can talk about the criminality. So the criminality has since 2004, it has only increased. So we have 2004, we have 2009, then you have 2014 and now 2019. The criminality, that is a proportion of the MPs who have criminal cases pending against them, have steadily increased. It was, you can draw a graph here, that it was 12% before, then it became 15%, and then it became 21%. And we have already mentioned 2 Supreme Court cases. That is another way of value addition. Then you can mention the recommendations of Election Commission and Law Commission. In fact, it was Election Commission's suggestion that the ECI should, the election commissioners should get security of tenure, and they must have contempt power. These are the recommendations of Election Commission itself, and Election Commission also recommended that those who are having criminal cases, they must be barred. So then similar recommendations have been given by Law Commission also. So you can give these recommendations by ECI and LC. You can quote some Supreme Court cases. You can draw these simple graphs to represent some data. So these are the various ways you can increase the value of your answer. So we will go to today's question. Discuss the issue of criminalization of politics and suggest the way forward. So this is a 15-marker question for 250 words. So attempt the answer. That's it for today. Thank you.